Welcome to Let's Talk Night. I'm Sam Manuel. I'm here with my good friend, Scott Colvin. Good to be doing this with you again. Ebony and Ivory. Quite a team. We're talking about emotional and spiritual checkups for men. Last time what we talked about is a blueprint for how we can actually have a emotional and spiritual checkup. You know, today I want to start off by talking about honest conversations. I think honest conversations are always the start. 2 Corinthians 1 verse 8, it says, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead." You know, I thought in talking about honest conversations, you know, Paul was keeping his relationship with God. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about talking about honest conversations. Paul was keeping his friends informed about how he was doing. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of times I can talk about my circumstances. I can talk about my situation. But I don't always like to inform people about how it's affecting me emotionally or affecting me spiritually.
Yeah, you know, I'm the same way, Sam. I can talk endlessly about here are the challenges at home, or here's what's going on here, or here's what I feel about it, but never bring in, hey, and you know what?
Love it.
I'm really not praying. Hey, you know what? I really haven't found scriptures to help me with this, and my faith is lagging. So I have a hard time pulling in how I'm doing with God along with here's what I'm experiencing in my circumstances.
Really good. And I think when we don't inform people, we miss the opportunity to learn how to rely on God in a greater way. I think no matter what we go through, God can help us grow through that if we're willing to depend on Him. You know, what's hard to inform people? What makes it, what do you have a hard time informing people about? What are things in your life that you go, man, I just have a hard time wanting to talk about this?
Well, I have a hard time wanting to talk about weaknesses. I think when I have disappointed myself, I kind of have a thing about disappointment. It's hard for me to deal with disappointment, but more importantly, being a disappointment.
Oh, wow.
So if I feel like I've been a disappointment to Margot, to a friend, to God, that's really hard for me to talk about and to share. So that's one of the big ones.
Wow, that's incredible. It's good to know that honest conversations help us focus on God and that we can have them if we identify the thing that makes them tough.
Yeah. I think, you know, another one that I have a hard time talking about is just guilt.
Oh, there we go.
And what I feel guilty about.
That's one.
Sins that I just, hey, this is burdening me. This is why I'm irritated. This is why I'm fearful. It's because I just feel so guilty.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's think about how we can get some encouragement. Because I think when we're going through things, I think the goal of Paul talking about and informing his friends was, one, to tell him how he grew with God. But two, I think, so he could get encouragement from his friends. In 2 Corinthians 7, verse 5, it says, "Even after we came into the province of Macedonia, we found no relief. We were restless and exhausted. Troubles met us at every turn. Outwardly, I faced conflicts, and inwardly, emotional turmoil. But God, who always knows how to encourage the depressed, encouraged us greatly by the arrival of Titus." You know, this scripture teaches that Paul is actually going to get encouragement when he's feeling things. Mm-hmm. You know, when we go through turmoil, I know I do, when I feel pressures in life. And pressure and stress are things that are harder for me to talk about. I don't know about you, but you tend to handle pressure better than I do, at least externally, for sure.
Yeah.
You just are better.
I can fake it better.
No, you have better character. We just have to be honest about some things where there's truth. You have more character than I do, so you are more resilient when it comes to facing pressure and challenges. I can't stand pressure. It's one of the things that made it so hard for me to play professional sports. I loved the game. I hated the pressure that surrounded being in the game. And I'm still growing and learning how to handle pressure and have character. What I love is that his friends, Titus, I believe that's who it was, is the guy that came into his life and helped him find encouragement. You know, what puts courage inside of you when you go, man, I'm feeling emotional turmoil, or I'm feeling like life is a bit out of control? What helps you relationally deal with that?
You know, on different talks that we have had, when I come in really pressured, or I come in really uptight, because I bottle stuff in, I'm uptight a lot.
Sure.
I think having a sense of humor about what we're going, it's not just a sense of humor like we're talking about a funny movie.
Yeah.
It's like a sense of humor about what we're going through and about what is happening. It just is like a release on the pressure valve for me to be able to laugh and go, yeah, I am a big jerk. Or, yeah, I'm a really angry guy, or whatever it is. And I think in our relationship, you've always helped me to dial down the uptightness by going, yeah, of course we're messing up. Of course we're sinful. Let's just talk about it and deal with it and move on. So I think that's always helped me.
That's great. And it's good because we all get encouragement in different ways. I think you and Margot's honesty with me over the years has been a tremendous encouragement. I remember we were in, it was the Grapevine. We were in the Grapevine.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in there, and Dale Johnson was in there. And we were having a time together, and I remember I didn't want to hear any truth. And you're trying to point out truth to me. You're going, Sam, I think you got to face this. Hey, Sam, I think you got to understand this. And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear that right now. No, I don't want to hear that. And we're in the Grapevine, and over the loudspeaker, because places
The music.
play music. And so they're playing music above, and the music is that song, Tell Me Something Good. Yeah. You remember that one?
I do.
And Dale stops me, and he goes, hey, Sam, pause. They're playing your song right now. Right there on the spot. And we all start laughing, and it helped me absorb more truth. I think the point of relationship is, how do we find encouragement? How do we put courage inside of each other? Proverbs 27, verse 6, it says, you can trust a friend who wounds you with his honesty, but your enemy's pretended flattery comes from insincerity. And, I think one of the ways to do a checkup is, and to know our emotional and spiritual check-in or check-up, is you got to recognize, how am I responding to truth inside of my life? Mm-hmm. Am I letting truth put courage inside of me? There's a book out. I won't go through all of it, but it talks about truth triggers, block feedback. It's a book by Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. And
sounds good. Truth triggers.
Well, what they actually talk about is a book that says, thanks for the feedback. And it's all about feedback and how we all need feedback. And I haven't always looked at it that way, because remember, I have a performance mentality. But thinking about, truth as a way to get feedback, because I need feedback, because feedback helps me grow. Mm-hmm. And they say what can happen in relationships sometimes is that when people are telling us truths, it's not the truth that we're necessarily looking for. Sometimes we're looking for an evaluation. We're saying, hey, I'm missing the standard. How do I rise to the standard? They said another one was coaching, when we're trying to grow. And so I want to grow. Tell me what I need to do to grow. Another part of the feedback was appreciation, right? You give thanks to somebody. Sometimes I'm looking for appreciation and somebody's giving me coaching. Mm. Sometimes I'm looking for coaching, but someone's giving me appreciation.
Sure.
I think when we look in the scriptures in the Bible, we see that even in 2 Timothy, when Paul is directing Timothy and he's saying, hey, here's how you ultimately can encourage each other in a relationship. Here's how you make sure that as you're doing a checkup or a check-in, that you encourage one another. Because it's not enough to say, here's what's going on in my life, right? Mm-hmm. You got to be able to go, here's what I do now that I know what's going on inside of my life. 2 Timothy 3, verse 16. Honest conversations, and the question is, are we learning from the input that we're getting? Mm-hmm. Are we getting the input that we need, and then are we learning from it? 2 Timothy 3, verse 16 says, every scripture is God-breathed, given by his inspiration, and profitable for instruction, for reproof and conviction of sin, for correction of error and discipline in obedience, and for training in righteousness, in holy living, in conformity to God's will in thought, purpose, and action, so that the man of God may be complete and proficient, well-fitted, and thoroughly equipped for every good work. What I love about the scripture is it tells you that it's not enough to know the information. Mm-hmm. You need help and input on how to apply the information accurately. Mm-hmm. That spiritual relationships are supposed to involve a reproof or a rebuke. Yep. They're supposed to involve correction in our lives. They're supposed to involve training, where it's, training. You've run track, where it's every day, it's consistent, and it's helping you on a goal. You have a focus and a goal, something you're trying to beat and win. Which one of these are you strong at? Which one do you think, oh man, this is a little bit more challenging?
That's a really good question. I would say I'm strongest on the training part of just I will put my head down and just go, this is what we need to do to get better.
Yep. I agree.
I don't think I handle rebukes really well. I usually get angry. I was thinking about a time when I was running in high school. I ran track, and my coach, his name was Bob Stallcup. We called him the Cup. And he would yell at us in the middle of the race.
Oh, wow.
And I would be running, and of course you're tired.
Yep.
And he would yell. They called me Scotty, and he would say, "You're nowhere, Scotty. You're nowhere, Scotty." And I would be running and waste all of this energy being mad at him doing that. And then afterwards, he would pull me aside and he would say, "Let me tell you where you should have been at this point in the race. Let me tell you when you should have made this move,
awesome.
how you should have thought about this." And he helped me kind of go, "Oh, here's how you do it." But I could get lost in the emotion of the moment and just go, "This person doesn't like me," versus, "Oh, this is to help me. This is to help me get better."
Yeah.
And when I remember that,
That's awesome.
then I can take anything.
Oh, that is awesome. So important is if we know our goal, that the goal of the input that we're getting is helping us be conformed to God's will, to God's purpose, like the scripture teaches, or to be successful, to grow, to be fully equipped. Then we can be excited and go, okay, I understand what the input in the training is for. Hence, I can endure the pain or maybe the discomfort of having to hear things that don't fit with our image, don't fit with, don't make us feel good. Awesome. I think that leads us to a heart connection at the end of the day.
Right. And I want to pick up on that. Heart connections. It's a checkup on how our spiritual relationships are really going. Sometimes we will talk, like we said, about our circumstances, or we can even talk about our relationship with God, but we won't talk about here's where we're at in our relationships and how close I am. I know even in this pandemic, I have gotten isolated and isolated from people without even realizing it's happening.
Yes.
You know, have you ever had any moments of that during the pandemic where you realized that?
No, I didn't necessarily recognize that I'm not as self-aware as maybe I get credit for. Maybe that's part of it. But no, I didn't recognize it until I got back in the fellowship, and I had such a hard time reacclimating myself to being around people all the time. Now I go, wow, I really miss being around people.
Yeah. And I think what can happen in our spiritual relationships is when we're not used to it, we can have a negative view or a negative feel about it all. And really one of the things I've come to believe is that discipleship, our spiritual interactions, is really just helping each other become more self-aware so that we can be closer to God and God can help us grow in the areas where we need to grow. A scripture that's helped me a lot is in Hebrews 10, 23 through 25 in the TPT. It says, now we must cling tightly to the hope that lives within us, knowing that God always keeps his promises. You know, I think it's really important that we get hope from God and that we believe God's going to keep his promises.
Right.
Because if I don't do that, then I get into a relationship and I'm too needy. And you've talked about that before, being too needy. There's a book by Carrie Oberbrunner that's called Show Up, Filled Up. It means when I show up in a relationship, and Jesus always showed up filled up. He was always ready to give. He was always ready to love because he spent time with God getting filled up and convinced that God was with him and that God gave him hope and that God loved him. So he starts by saying, if you're going to build spiritual relationships, you got to show up filled up with the time with God.
Oh, wow.
He goes on in verse 24, discover creative ways to encourage others and to motivate them toward acts of compassion, doing beautiful works as expressions of love. Let me ask you, Sam, with the coaching you have gotten in your football career and experience, what's the most creative way you've had a coach motivate you?
I've had a number. But the one that comes straight to my mind right off the top is we had this guy, Coach Crow. He was a huge guy. He was like 300 and something pounds. And me and my brother Sean, we weren't hitting each other. This was a Pop Warner, but we wouldn't hit each other, and we were scared to hit. And so Coach Crow at 350 pounds got us across from each other, made us line up head to head, and then he would stand behind one of us with his foot on our butt. And he would yell, hike, and then he would boot one of us into the other one as hard as he could. It was quite the experience. I don't want to share this, but Coach Crow, someone ended crying at the end of that one. But I'll tell you what, we started hitting after that day because we didn't want Coach Crow with 300 pounds of power kicking us into one another to hit one another. It was very motivating.
That's a great story. You know what I find interesting about that story? Tell me some of the coaches that you've had in your career, especially later in your career with the 49ers.
Oh, man, I had John Marshall in my career. I had Pete Carroll in my career. I had Bill Walsh.
Bill Walsh, Seifert.
George Seifert was a fantastic coach. Mike Shanahan.
So here's what's interesting to me with all those names you just listed. The one that you thought of that motivated you the most was Coach Crow and Pop Warner. Sometimes it's not the person or the status of the person that's engaging us.
Right.
It's the moment, and it's God can use anyone to motivate us and to encourage us.
Well, it's how much progress the coach helps you make, right? It's the improvement that you end up making, or it's pivotal moments in your life where you realize there was a fear, but then you made a big jump. Some of the other coaches did that, but professionally, they're less into motivating and more into the end result of your performance.
Yep, that makes sense. I just love it. And that fits perfectly with this scripture about discovering creative ways to motivate and encourage to acts of compassion. He goes on in verse 25 and says, "This is not the time to pull away and neglect meeting together, as some have formed the habit of doing, because we need each other. In fact, we should come together even more frequently, eager to encourage and urge each other onward as we anticipate that day dawning."
Oh, really good.
He says, listen, this is not the time. And I think as this pandemic has dragged on and we have gotten the gut punches of the Delta variant and different things, this is not the time to pull away from each other, either physically or emotionally, but to make sure we're determined and devoted to getting together and getting time together.
Yeah, what I like about that too is he says, don't get in the habit. It's telling you that relationships are also a byproduct of the habits that we develop, right? And even an article I was reading, it talked about how our brains have been rewired being in a pandemic to be isolated. And so a lot of what we're going through is rewiring our brains to be with people, to get back in the habit of being around people more consistently. And so I love what he said. You grow and change by making a habit, not a religious ritual, but a habit in your life that you keep to that helps you grow.
Yeah. That reminds me of, we're going all sports today and all football actually, but that reminds me of, Remember the Titans when Coach Boone was trying to get them to come together when they were at camp.
Love the movie.
But when they were out on the field, they couldn't come together.
Right.
So he paired them up and made them come together outside of the practice so they would actually develop a friendship and a relationship.
Yep.
And I think one of the things we can do religiously in the church is just have church relationships where our relationship is built solely around church events or activities. And what this scripture I read is saying is, hey, we've got to come together even more frequently. It's got to be legitimate friendship. And that's a daily, hey, how you doing? Did you see this movie? Did you see what happened to the 49ers? Hey, here's what went on in my home last night.
Oh, that's great.
It's friendship.
Yes, I love that thought. I love that thought. Great thought.
And so that's what he's talking about there. As we kind of wrap this part up, because he says, listen, we've got to urge each other onward.
Right.
I think real love isn't just accepting each other where we're at. And I know you've done that for me, Sam. And I think, in my life, I think my wife has done that more than anybody.
Sure.
Where she has not just accepted this is where I'm at, but has urged me on to something more, something better. You can be a better father. You can be more emotionally connected to God. And that is love. Sometimes I think we back off because we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to upset somebody. And we pull back on engaging about the truth.
Yes.
Can you think of a time for you, Sam, where it was uncomfortable, but you engaged about the truth?
Well, the truth is different. Sometimes the truth for me is honesty in my effort, right? And being called to a certain effort that I make consistently. But I remember we were in Santa Clara and we had to move. We were just coming down to be with you guys again in Contra Costa. And we had to be out of this house by a certain amount of time. And I had waited last moment. And so we had a whole house to move, but it was Valentine's Day, so I didn't have anybody, so I had to move it on my own. At some point in doing all this move, I looked at Tanae and I go, I'm done. When you talked about your wife is your best relationship for helping you grow and become different, my wife just has incredible character. And I have the physical ability, but I don't have the character. And so she will look at me and go, no, we're going to finish this. This is what needs to be done. And all I can think about is, we're not anything. I'm going to be doing all the lifting in here. But she's like, we're going to do it. And it got to be late at night. And she kept going, nope, we still got, here's the expectation. Here's the standard. Here's what we got to get done. You got to put those doors back on the hinges. You got to take the curtains down. You got to get all that stuff out in the front of the house. And nothing can be. She just kept driving. And I wanted to quit so, I said, they can keep the deposit. They can have the money. I don't care, hon. I don't care if I get in trouble. Get in the car. We got to go home. She's like, no, we're not. This is what we're going to do. But she helped me see that I could do so much more than what I knew I was capable of doing. And I think that's what any good coach has done, any good friend in relationship has done. I think the goal is, how do you grow? And I think that's what makes it loving, that we're growing and we're maximizing who we are as people, not just settling for what's comfortable.
I think that's a great point. And I think you make a great point that in our marriages, it is us urging each other on that shows our love for people.
Right.
And our love for each other.
Yes.
And I think it starts at home, and then it spreads from there to our friendships.
Great.
It's been great to be together and talking about this, Sam.
Yeah,
I know I learn a lot every time we talk. And I think to wrap us up for our Let's Talk night tonight, let's get us to ask a couple of questions of each other. The first, what honest conversations do we need to have with each other, or maybe we have been avoiding, that is going to lead to us having tremendous growth? Because there's usually one conversation that we need to have that we've been avoiding that will lead to that kind of growth. And then secondly, have we given up and have we formed a habit of just building church relationships based around a church schedule or events, as opposed to real friendships where we're just in each other's lives and in the fabric of each other's lives? And so those are two huge checkups for us emotionally and spiritually as men about our relationships. It's been great to be together. It's been great to have another Let's Talk night. Enjoy your time together tonight.